Let me know if he gets too loud.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Minding My Mental Health. I am Tenitria Williams, and I am so excited that you are joining us today. You guys know what I want you to do. Hashtag live if you are watching live. Let me know where you're watching from, and hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. I'm going to actually take a moment to share this myself. And then we'll get into introducing our guest. I'm so excited to have her with us today. Let's see. We actually have two guests today, and you'll get to meet both of our guests today. Let's see. Let me share it a couple more places. Go ahead and hashtag where you're watching from. Share this video, tag friends. Like the actual broadcast if you haven't. Okay, I see a couple people jumping in here. Okay. All right, so welcome. We have with us Miss Jessica Sledge, who is also a counselor and therapist. I didn't know. I was like, she's not an LPC, and I couldn't remember. And so that's why I think I just put mental health worker. But Jessica and I worked together almost 9 years ago now, because Brielle's almost 9. So
wow,
about 9 years.
Feels like it was just a couple.
I know. So again, welcome. So big time welcome. You also have a little person you're holding, so I will let you introduce them.
This is my son Matthew.
Hi, Matthew.
Hi. So we had a whole last minute schedule change with everything today. So he's hanging out with me for a little bit. But he's 7.5 months.
And yes, we've had so far. So thank you, Matthew, for breaking boundaries and setting records here today.
You got a big old grin.
So again, you guys know every week we're coming here, and the goal of this broadcast is to tear down the stigma of receiving mental health treatment, taking care of our mental health, bringing practical awareness of how we can better take care of ourselves, and so we can just be a better society, healthier mentally, spiritually, all of those types of things. And today I wanted to talk about something that we actually don't talk about a lot. But it does impact a lot of families. And so I thought, why not, again, tear down these stigmas? Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. So again, I want you tagging, sharing, all of that good stuff. We're talking about issues or having concerns with fertility or infertility or all of those types of things that, again, impact so many families. And Jessica has been so gracious to share her journey from motherhood to motherhood. And so we're going to just talk about this. We're going to get into it a bit. And you guys know, if you have comments or questions, please put those in the comment section. So Jessica, I'm going to ask you, just tell us something about like yourself. Who is Jessica?
Oh, depends on the day. Like you said, I'm a mental health therapist. And yeah, it was 9 years ago. I think I've been doing this for it'll be 10 years this summer. Actually, probably is about 10 years. Yeah, because it's June. So it's been 10 years that I've been a therapist, which has been just incredible. I mean, it's just, that question's always so hard because I'm like, how do you sum everything up? And it's, I'm a wife and mom, stepmom, and,
So you said mom and stepmom. Tell us about your journey to becoming mom and stepmom.
Oh, well, stepmom part, no, it all kind of ties in together. So, I had been previously married, and that was where a lot of the infertility stuff that we'll talk about, I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit more detail later, the first marriage. And then after that one had ended, God just orchestrated it for this current my husband, and it was a whole God thing. And, so we got married, and he's got 2 teenagers, 2 girls, and I love them to death, even though I don't think that they would believe me if I said it, but I do tell them all the time, it's funny and stuff. And then I knew that God had promised me that I was gonna have my own infant baby to mother one day. And lo and behold, here he is. So we had him in November, and
the manifestation of the promise.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm not crying today.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Oh, we'll see. I make people cry. Remember, I'll cry too. I'm sure.
I will try very hard not to cry. Because if I'm honest, when I see pictures of him, because I remember your journey or some of your journey, and when I see pictures of him, I get a little bit teary. I'm like, oh, I remember us like praying for him, or for somebody, right? So it's really a beautiful journey. So tell us a little bit about when we met. I think, Jessica, you had already lost a baby, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you have trouble conceiving at that point, or?
I didn't know, like looking back, I think we did, but I didn't know it. We had just gotten married in 2012. And so, it was honeymoon, like we were newlyweds and all that kind of thing. And then found out we were pregnant in the spring of 2013. I was about to graduate grad school. And when it comes to, things like, your cycle and all kinds of stuff, I was never consistent anyway. So I just figured that was how I was. I didn't think anything of it, nothing. I have found out since then that I actually have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. I don't really have the cyst part, but I do have the hormones out of whack, which means that, when you ovulate and how often and if you do and all of that is just completely all over the place. So looking back, I think that there was probably more challenges than we were aware of. But it was a, not trying, not preventing kind of situation. And so when we found out we were pregnant, it was a very nice surprise. We were excited. I've always wanted to be a mom. I'm the oldest of four. There's three sisters. And we've always been around, big families. I love kids. It was one of those things of like, I want to be a mom. I mother everybody who comes into my circle. I adopt my friends' kids. I'm like aunts to all of them. And so I never thought we would have an issue. And then it did take a little longer, but then we got pregnant. So we were like, okay, we're good. Well, then we went in for the ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. So we found out later that I actually had a physical anomaly in my uterus, essentially, that was like a division. And they think the baby had tried to implant on that, and therefore there wasn't enough blood supply to support. So that led to a whole, just you talk about grief, negative self-thought. You start blaming yourself, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? You feel kind of betrayed because it's like my body is designed to take care of your life and now it's not. Like, what happened? It's a betrayal of yourself. And then kind of like, and I'm really bad about the whole, like I struggle with the whole not enough, not good enough thing anyway. For most of my life I have. And so that just kind of compounded it. Like, oh, well, what's wrong with me that I can't have a baby, or what's wrong with me that I can't carry, or what's, a lot of grief, a lot of challenges, and a lot of anxiety, just a lot of dwelling. Sorry, he found the wall and then he couldn't get past it. So we, the whole medical procedure, even too, after finding out that the baby had passed, was in and of itself. That alone can be its own topic. Just everything that came along with it. And then it ended up, this is kind of like, I guess, a quick overview. We can kind of dive in deeper where we want to go with it. But after all that was said and done, we found out officially about the PCOS stuff and everything. Then it kind of led to a whole whirlwind of just fixation, just taking pregnancy tests all the time, like trying to be overly aware of my cycle, which adds stress, which then throws everything off even more. So it kind of fights against yourself, and it was a whole spiral place.
Yeah.
And it took a while to eventually kind of come out of it. But one of the challenging things is I remember, well, it was both beautiful and challenging. So the beautiful part was we were very public about the pregnancy. Like I found out pretty early on, and we were very probably, we believe life begins at conception. So we're like, hey, there's a baby, there's a life. And then people were asking, how are you doing? How's the baby? How's following up? And so then we had to kind of do an announcement of, okay, well, this is, and I chose to do that public too, of like, lost the baby, we've lost the baby, the pregnancy. And it was amazing how many messages I got, both comments on, I did most of it on Facebook, but how many comments on my status, but also just private messages I got from women who were along the lines of, I've never told anybody, but I had a miscarriage also. I see you, you're not alone in it. Kind of to be encouraging, but it was the fact of how many had never said it out loud, or how many had never told anybody else that they had lost a baby.
Yeah.
And we really don't talk about miscarriage.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons I wanted to have this particular topic, because I think, there are certain things I'm like, tag your friends who are doctors. We're talking about doctors. But so many people not only don't ever or acknowledge that has happened. It's also, sometimes it carries, like you talked about, that shame or this guilt. And so that's really what I want to kind of talk about, and hopefully tear down that it's not a failure. It's not a slight against who you are as a person or as a woman. And you mentioned, like, my body was designed for that. And I think women often are like, no, this is what my body's supposed to do. And then if something happens, it really does feel like, a lot of things are happening. So I'm glad that the people were reaching out to you. And I just think that's so very important. So as you're going through the grief, how did you go through that or navigate through that grieving process?
Every day was a little different. Looking back, there are things that I think we did well, and things that if I could have a do-over, it'd be different. I do think that the loss, because I had an ectopic pregnancy a couple of years after that too. So there were actually two within that marriage that we lost. And I think that really impacted the marriage itself, because we didn't know how to talk about grief. Like, I could figure things out for me, but we didn't know how to share it with one another. And so I think that was a big piece of it, of just not knowing how to process our own feelings about failing or whatever label we want to put on it, and then not knowing how to share that with one another and then support one another. So I think that was a not so great piece with the grief, of the lack of communication, lack of transparency with those, my husband and then those closest that we probably needed the most to be transparent with. But it also just talking to some of my other support groups. Like, I remember and giving myself permission to not be okay with things, to let the grief be there. My mentor at the time, our supervisor, Margaret Strigley, wonderful woman. For one of the most helpful things that I was told was by her. She, when you look for a red car, all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. When you kind of get that one thing. Well, it seemed like there were babies everywhere after the first loss. Like, everyone was getting pregnant. There were showers. There were all kinds of just surprise things. I remember scrolling on my newsfeed one day, and there were like 7 different pregnancy announcements that I saw within the hour. But she told me, I don't have to be happy about it. I don't have to celebrate that. If I'm not able to, it's okay to not. It doesn't mean that I'm not hating on them. I'm not mad about their baby. There's not even like jealousy. I just didn't have it in me to celebrate when I was longing for my own, and that was really freeing, to just, grief is allowed to be present. Let it be present. It's not permanent. It's not forever. It's okay for it to be. And I don't have to pretend I didn't go to baby showers. I didn't go to, little bitty baby birthday parties. And I couldn't. I couldn't. And it was okay that I couldn't.
Yeah, I've actually heard that from several, typically clients who are coming in. And if they're dealing with that struggle, it is, my friend just announced another friend. And like you said, it's such a time where most people are saying, congratulations, we're so excited. And they would often say it would be a trigger for, almost just a spiral, for them. And guys, Jessica is obviously being mommy right now. So if she's
Sorry.
under the camera, you're absolutely fine, Jessica. Just know that she's taking care of little Matthew, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Making sure. I was like,
but I've got you. I've got y'all, and I'm here.
So Jessica, you mentioned your supervisor, you're a counselor. Do you feel like you had skills in your repertoire to help you through this that maybe other people didn't? Or did you feel like, hey, I'm just as vulnerable or like as the next person?
I think a little bit of both. I think that, where we were at the time, the company we worked that, both worked for at the time, we had a really good support system of other colleagues who had been in the field for decades, and so being able to kind of lean on them and draw on that kind of collective insight knowledge was very helpful. I think that there were some, I guess maybe you could think of it like I was primed to kind of see things differently. So like, because of being in the mental health field and having helped people through grief of other kinds and such, just that awareness of, okay, what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? Feeling isn't true necessarily. It's not, fact. And it was still a challenge to apply it. And I definitely didn't in the very beginning, but like as it went on, kind of being able to catch and go, okay, this is getting out of hand. And I think eventually those skills kind of came into play and I was able to apply them a little bit more. But I would say in the beginning, it was just so unexpected that we had and then having difficulty getting pregnant even after that first loss. It was more of a very vulnerable in the spiral, very much in it, and couldn't, like, I could set it aside and do work, but then like work was over here and then personal was a totally different thing. I didn't really blend the two. Like I apply work skills to personal, like I should have, that I could have anyway.
Okay. But tell me how you would deal with people. Like, would you avoid I know you said you didn't go to baby showers, but would you avoid people, or were you like, I want to be social? Kind of tell me how you navigated that.
Trying to remember. It's been a minute, so I'm trying to like think back. There was some avoidance. I remember there was one in particular. We went to high school together, kind of grew up together, and she had her own difficult journey to get pregnant, but it was too raw for me still. And so I avoided that one. I avoided, I didn't look at her page. I didn't look at, didn't try to reach out, didn't go to the shower. Her mom was not happy with me about that, but I didn't have it in me. And I had to be honest with myself of that. The expectation, I think, of others to give, it would be helpful, for other people to be around to hear your story. And you're not the only one in that. It's like, okay, but I don't have it in me today to give it. So there were times that I would avoid. And then there's other times that it would be, I'd send a message when I could, or like, I'd just reach out and be like, oh, hey, congratulations. And then I would not continue the conversation, or I just kind of kept that distance, I guess, really, until I was healed more and able to truly be joyful with them.
Yeah. So I love the word you use, healed. What was that journey like to get to healing?
Because that was God.
Happen. And some people they're able to go through this healing journey, and sometimes it really just kind of knocks you all the way off. Tell me about your journey to healing.
It took a while. It took a long while. It was definitely, it was, for me, it was Jesus. It was faith was a huge piece of it. And just allowing the support that, like, family and friends support that had been placed around me to actually be a support was a huge thing. But learning, like, really also being able to talk about it. I've always kind of been the thing of, just because other people want to stay quiet about a topic, for me, that almost makes me want to talk about it more. Like, especially, like, for example, within the faith circle, I'm a therapist. I take medication. I have an antidepressant. I've been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and so I take meds for that. And so I'm like, you can have Jesus and meds too. And that's kind of like, more people want to be quiet about it. Let me talk about it. And so when so many women were kind of like, hey, thank you so much for speaking out about your miscarriage. This is mine. This is my story. I've never told anybody. It kind of empowered me to be open and be, I guess, more vulnerable in a sense, more transparent about some of it. And I think that was really helpful because it kept me aware that I'm not the only one walking this path. And that alone, just knowing that there were others who had been down it and hearing their stories and their recovery and their experiences and healing and seeing, and then knowing this about them and then seeing their kids, that they had kids after for some of them. And so that part was, I think, really helpful. Just having that encouragement and that reminder constantly in my face because of these other people. So talking about the loss, painting, I love painting. Let me know if that's loud. He's got a water bottle, so let me know if it's distracting. And I remember one night, probably about a year afterwards, I just was thinking about him, which I don't know for sure. I think it was a boy, but that's just, that whole death thing. But I thought he was going to be a girl, so I could be completely wrong on that first one too. But getting my paint set out and just having him, it ended up, I didn't have a plan. I was just thinking of him and then painted the feeling, and it ended up being a picture of a baby kind of in a blanket and among stars. Like, I just call it my baby sleeps among the stars. And at the time, that was kind of the memory that I needed to honor this life that had been, that otherwise there was really no proof that he existed, and it's, that was another hard thing too, finding ways to make that monument, that reminder of a life that had existed, that did exist, even if it was just for a short moment. And then, for me, it was in the context of small groups, but really God kind of getting a hold and helping me realize some of the thoughts that I was holding on to, some of the beliefs. And
what were some of those beliefs that you had to really challenge to get to the place of healing? Yeah.
That it was all on me, that it was completely my fault, 100% my fault that I couldn't carry the baby, and my fault that I couldn't get pregnant again. That it was all my effort, but there's a whole other person who was involved in it. So that was very, kind of not accurate either. The biggest one, I was at a life group, and if people don't have life groups, it's kind of like, the Bible study or small group, Sunday school, whatever they want to call it. But the friend who was leading it was reading a book about, I don't remember who wrote it, but it was essentially talking about how the things that people say to us can become our inner voice. And so people criticize some things, and when we're mad, we kind of bring that back on ourselves and such. And at this point, I had stopped the obsessive pregnancy testing. We were in a calmer place, I thought, with marriage-wise, and so it wasn't this panic anymore. I worked through some of that. So I wasn't even thinking baby stuff. But in that moment, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, Lord, I don't think that's not accurate, because everybody tells me that I would be a good mom. I don't know how many times, oh, you're going to be a great mom, you're born to be a mom, all these comments. It's I said, so everybody tells me I'm a good mom, so it's not that. And then I realized, I was like, I think you think I would be a bad mom, or else you would have given me a baby by now.
Ooh.
And I didn't even know I was holding on to that. But it's and kind of just that, in my spirit heard you will mother a baby one day. And I was like, is that me wishful thinking? Is that really you? I don't know, because I'm scared to hope. I don't, that kind of thing. I finally ended up go play okay place. I don't want to open that up again. And it was I saw it in caps. You will mother a baby one day. And
so he said, have a word now.
Oh, he got a lot of words, because he said, I did not create you, form you, grow you, and give you these desires to turn around and tell you that you're not good enough to have them. You will mother a baby one day. And I was like, okay. Okay. Wrote the date in my Bible, but it was that belief.
Had you given up hope? Did you get to a place where you were saying, I would rather not hope for that, because I don't want to be disappointed? Because I see and hear that often. So you had gotten to that place.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because hope hurt. And, at this point too, there was other factors, within, within my relationship and marriage, things they were okay, but they had kind of gotten really rocky and then kind of gotten back into an okay place, but it wasn't, the marriage itself wasn't very good. And so there were other factors too that made it more painful to think about hoping for a baby, because I didn't know if it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a self-protection hardening to say, but that's also denying something that was the desire of my heart from when I was little bitty. So it was kind of denying part of myself in a way too. So it wasn't really the best place to live.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why God was like, you're not going to stay here anymore. We're going to take care of this.
So Jessica, let me ask, because you've mentioned you're a believer.
Yes.
For you, sometimes it's people saying, hey, you may need to adjust your expectations so that you're not disappointed in case you don't have a child. And then other people are like, no, keep the faith. How did you navigate through that piece of what do I need to keep hoping and believing, or do I need to, he's fine. Do I need to kind of go, I'm totally okay with not birthing a child?
Yeah. I don't know that I fully got to a place of peace within that tension, but I learned how to, I think, how to exist within the tension of it. Because on one hand, I remember going, we'd go to conferences, and, I have another friend who, her story is similar. They had 11 years, no, longer than that. It's been 15 years of infertility between her daughter, and then they just had a son who's a year older than him.
Wow.
And I remember she and I, kind of talking about just the challenges and things. And we go to conferences, and of course they'd want to, there are times that they would pray over the woman who couldn't get pregnant, or infertility challenges, because, God can heal and he can do whatever. So that's a fact. And then having to, he's tired. So nothing's happening. Nothing's okay. And then having to balance too with, I guess it was learning how to live in the peace of God is good even if I don't have what I think I want.
That's really good.
And it's not easy. That's not an easy place to stay. And learning how to be content. That people talk about that Philippians verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Well, we try to label it, with, I can do anything. If God's directed it, you can, in his strength. But really that whole section and chapter is about being content and finding contentment, no matter what the barriers or the challenges or the hardships are, trying to make sure that I'm, sorry, it's a different kind of audience we don't want. We're not trying to, but, the challenge of learning how to be content, because God doesn't owe me anything at the end of the day. And even if I believe that, that I was meant to be a mom before he had clarified that belief, that erroneous belief I had, he didn't owe me anything. And so being able to say, okay, is my God enough right now, today, as is? And there were some days, I'll tell you, my flesh said, no, he wasn't. Being totally honest, and so there was that struggle of, okay, I want to keep the hope because this is what I want, but yet I don't know if you're going to give it to me, but even if you don't, okay, I do still, okay, I have this relationship with you that is still filling, and started to see other relationships in my life where, like spiritual children, which it's, for me, it wasn't quite 100% the same, but still being able to see those, around me that I could pour into, and then I could parent and encourage and love. And then also even clients, like taking that nurturing desire and applying it in other places. And so it was still, that kind of sort of answers the question, but talks around it. But it's still being able to see how God allowed me to be a mom to those around me before I was a biological mother to a child.
And I think that's a huge point, Jessica, and I'm glad you brought it up. Sometimes we put it as in, this is the only definition of whatever, motherhood, or, it's like, no, if I don't birth a child, I remember saying, and this is long before I was even thinking about getting married or having a kid, I said, I want to adopt. And this guy said something I thought was so incredibly ignorant. He said, you're too pretty to adopt. And I went, what in the world does that even mean? But this
has
idea
nothing to do with the other.
Yeah, nothing. But he was like, but you should just do this because you're smart and you're these things. And I went, yeah, but I still have, like, parenting can come in different forms. It's not always just through birthing a child that you become a mom. Or that you can parent. Like you said, having people that you can pour into is really, really, to me, very powerful, especially for people who have that nurturing heart, that desire where, I was never the person that was like, oh, my ovaries are jumping when I see the babies. I'd be like, oh, that's a cute baby over there. And
over there.
Did you find that people were awkward around you? Like, were there, I can remember because we were both, I knew you were like actively trying and I wasn't actively trying to have a baby. And I came in and I was like, I don't know how to tell Jessica like that I have a child, or like I'm pregnant and I know she's like trying. And again, I was not actively trying. I was like, and you were like, congratulations. And I was like, like, do you find that people can be awkward trying to navigate how to do that? And what would you say to the people if they're in that situation?
Yeah, there were times, definitely. So my sister, or one of my sisters, actually had gotten pregnant because she'd been trying a little bit too, but she had gotten pregnant. And I had been due at Christmas. She should have been due in March, but she had complications. So she actually had my nephew early that same December. So my nephew is the same age that my baby should have been. My first one. So which thankfully that was actually not ever a huge trigger for me, other than like there was a moment in the very beginning, but overall it was good. But she kind of had that same whole thing of like, hey, are you good? kind of situation. So yeah, that awkwardness definitely was there. I think it depended on the person. Like, so I know, like, because you and I by then had kind of gotten pretty close. And so the closer the relationship for me anyway, I was able to celebrate a little bit more, rather than just saying, oh, here's the person over here. Great. There's another pregnancy kind of thing. But it's like, because it's someone I knew, or like, my sister, I knew her struggles and stuff. And so I could genuinely celebrate, or like, be, the surprise blessings within everything. And it's like, okay. But I would say, at least, like I said, I like to talk about stuff. So ask, don't make it a big surprise. Like if someone ow, don't bite. If somebody, we're teething, made a huge, public announcement and expected me without knowing to just be super excited, that was not going to happen. If I was blindsided. So I would say give the person the heads up. If it's going to be, if you want a big surprise announcement, maybe for everybody else, but not that person that who might be hurting. Give them the honor, I think, of letting them know privately, but also the space for them to not be okay with it. I actually had to do this on the other side of it. So when I got pregnant with this little guy, I was working with a client who had some fertility struggles and had to have had a hysterectomy. So even though she had the desire to be a mom, she physically cannot. And so having that moment with her of going, okay, I'm going to go on maternity leave because I am pregnant. And she knew that I'd had struggles in the past too, which is part of our rapport building, which I think helped her in that way. But it was that moment of, she was like, oh, congrats. And I was like, it's okay if it's not okay. It's okay if you're not okay. We're not happy with it. And then there were a few tears. So I think giving whoever, you're talking to, the permission to not be okay for you, to not celebrate it for you, or to know that we don't always have just one feeling at a time.
Right.
You can be excited and heartbroken at the same time, and so giving them permission, or just checking in and going, are you okay? And, at what level do you want me to include you in my updates, and how much do you want to hear about it?
That's good.
Kind of just check in with them, I think, and taking them at face value. If they say, I'm fine, okay, treat them like that until they come back and say, okay, too much, or, whatever.
That's good feedback. So what would you say the mental battles you had to face through that process?
Anxiety, the what ifs, well, so within the first loss, definitely the anxiety of the am I ever going to get pregnant? Are we ever going to have a kid? What can I do? Am I not doing enough of something? Mm-hmm. How is this going to look? What if? But I'd also say, well, the anxiety kind of carried on through everything and kind of came back when I got pregnant too, because that was a whole other trigger too. But but a lot of it, especially in the beginning, was just that kind of just that that inner critic, the just my own worst enemy, and the depression that came along with it of just attacking myself and believing these lies about my worth and my ability and my value. And, oh, it's never going to be like this. Oh, this is all your fault. You can never do it right. What's wrong with you? Like that kind of stuff. Which I think that's where having that support, a group of friends that I could actually finally open up and say, hey, these are what I'm thinking and feeling. And they were able to kind of go, hey, here's some truth you can hold on to instead. Like, that's not accurate.
A lot of anxiety does come from us holding on to a lie or an erroneous belief. Kristen actually said here in the comments, it says, I've had thoughts of being a horrible mom and I had to learn not to say that anymore. And not only not to say that, Kristen, I would even say not to believe that, because it's really difficult to move forward with those types of thoughts. You mentioned your support system. Tell me how your support system helped you.
Well, before that, real fast, and it kind of ties in with that a little bit too, but that because not believing something can be really hard. And so one of the things that we had learned was, because I'm the whole thing, if I can tell you if I'm believing this negative thing and I'm supposed to suddenly try to buy into this thing over here that's the opposite, I'm not going to believe it. But I've learned like to stair step, oh, I'm a terrible mom. Today, I had a great moment with my kid. And that moment I was okay. And then, okay, a half a day, or I had this, or like slowly believing, more and more things that you kind of go, hey, look, there's proof that, okay, I wasn't a terrible mom. Like, that's how I know it's not true. And then growing until you can go, okay, I'm not a terrible mom. I might have some days I struggle, but I'm not a terrible mom. That's not who I am.
So I call that looking for confirmation. Like the opposite, looking for proof of the opposite, And so I tell people, I said, celebrate that confirmation throughout your day. When you see, like you said, that moment of, I just gave my kid some really good advice, or I just kept my cool when my kid was losing it in the middle of the grocery store. Look at their confirmation that I'm not so bad.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, and having, I think, back to the support system question, like that was, having them help me catch those other times and pour into, when I was struggling. And once I let them know I was struggling with some of these thoughts and beliefs, them pouring into going, hey, no, that's not accurate. Look at this. And here, find these confirmations. They help point out confirmations that I was filtering out, because it didn't line up with that negative belief.
So, right. So what would you say to a family who's actively trying, and what I see, I think the struggle is not just the loss, that initial loss, or it's also typically when families are trying, there's multiple loss, or there's oftentimes not just this happened and then bam, it's we tried and then that didn't work. And so it just really starts. I know I've worked with families, and once it becomes this is the third try, or this is the fourth, it really can be heavy. What do you say to a family who's going through this process and struggling with this?
Definitely make sure you have good doctors who are on board with you, because I had a fantastic one who actually helped me figure out the PCOS piece. And then she left and I had somebody else who was not so great kind of situation. So making sure that your medical support, as much as you can, is on board with what you're wanting to do and what you're trying to do. And I know it sounds cliche, but the stress will mess you up big time. And so being able to find times to just take a break from all of the fertility stuff as much as you possibly can, just planned vacations, planned attempts of, hey, after this attempt, if it doesn't work, well, we're going to pause. We're going to hit pause. It's not a permanent stop. It's not walking away, but we're going to take a pause for a second. And just communicate with each other and figure out, especially in a partner situation, figuring out how can you best support each other going through it. Because like I said earlier, one of the biggest, I think, downfalls, negative sides, is that my husband and I at the time never figured out how to talk to each other about our grief. And so, he had the thought that he was supposed to be the rock for me, kind of thing. Where for me, I'm like, do you even care? Because you're not showing me anything.
Yeah.
And then I would get like super emotional. And then I'm thinking, oh, well, he doesn't want me to be all this emotion. So I was kind of shutting it down. And so it kind of created that just a wall, really. And so we didn't even know how to comfort each other and how to support each other. So definitely having those conversations. I mean, if it means going into it, for therapy to have a third party help you facilitate that conversation, do it, because your marriage is worth it. Yeah. The children are the icing on a marriage. It's not the point of a marriage isn't necessarily to have kids. And so your relationship is worth the effort no matter what happens children wise. But yeah, and then just that support system kind of thing, whether it's friendships or family members or whomever. And that also may mean distancing from those who aren't supportive and don't really get it. Can I help you?
He's getting love in the comments too. Someone's like, he's so adorable.
Thank you. He's got this head-banging dancing thing going, so that's his way of kind of getting, hey, I want all the attention. Thank you for the kisses. So
you're welcome, Matthew. Just show us all of your little personality.
Oh, he is.
What
He's also trying to fight sleep.
Oh, look at him. He is getting it. Oh, I remember those little days. What would you say about how your relationship with God was impacted? Because you mentioned this belief of like, you must not think I'm going to be a good mom. And I know, again, a lot of families, when they're dealing with this, there is that resentment that comes in. How did you navigate your spirituality? How did you navigate that piece?
I got mad. I mean, and then I had to, it wasn't perfect, obviously, going all the way through it. There were times where I kind of like pulled away and I was distant. And then there are other times that I leaned in, when I got to where, when I got to just the heartache piece, just when it was hurting, I got past the frustration and the anger and the you owe me thoughts and things. And it was just, I was hurting. Turning to that, the Psalms and praying and talking and learning to pray scripture and not focusing on promises of getting anything per se other than his comfort, but also just finding the scripture verses that cried out my heartache, for me, and kind of going, okay, that's validating. He's just grinning. You're very distracting right now in the best of ways. There was something else I was going to say about that, though. What was it? But there were times I got mad, and it was, kind of one of the things I learned from reading the Psalms was being able to be honest with God about how I felt. But I mean, I wasn't necessarily like, correct and going, okay, God, I blame you for this, and it's your fault, and there's that kind of stuff. But being able to say, this is how I'm feeling right now, knowing that he's not rejecting me from that feeling because of that feeling. And he kind of goes, okay, I got space for it. We'll deal with it, but I got space for you, and it's okay to do that. He's, he can handle it. And it was able to let me get it out so that I could then move past it with him. But also just, there was a book called Through the Eyes of the Lion by Levi Lesko. And a friend of mine had also just gone through a miscarriage a couple of years after me, but before we did that book, and she found it. So we kind of went through it. So Levi Lesko and his wife had lost one of their daughters. She had an asthma attack when she was 4, right before Christmas, and passed away. And so that book is kind of coming out of that. They call her Linya the Lion, which is where the Eyes of the Lion comes from. And so just that was very helpful with how he sees in like scripturally looking at heaven and what it looks like and the other, the promises that we have of the future and things like that. And so having those, I guess, images helped. Picture, when I was missing my baby going, okay, God, give him a hug for me, hold him for me, kind of thing. And not just saying, hey, I believe that my baby's in heaven, but actually like, okay, like picturing it, envisioning it, and truly believing it of, things. And then there was Pinterest has a ton of resources. Like I made a secret board, all about it. And then another friend had also had a miscarriage shortly after mine. And so I added her to it. And so she and I kind of would share things. And there was a prayer, if I can say it without crying myself, but it was one that I read it and then I kept crying it. And it was, Jesus, since I never got the chance to tell my child about you, what will you tell about me? So yeah.
I told you you're not making me cry.
I'm making myself cry. Yeah.
So those resources, Pinterest, and I hadn't even thought about that. And that was something I wanted to ask you about. What are some resources that helped you along the journey? And I literally have never thought about Pinterest being a resource. What other things did you find? Kristen says you're making her cry.
Sorry.
What other resources would you say that are out there that were really beneficial for you?
I don't really know that I had any official resources other than what I went to look for myself. And I think that was the hard part because it was like I had to go find them. Versus,
did the hospital not provide? Wow.
Not that I remember. Well, and even then, like, so there's, when you have a loss, depending on how far you are, sometimes they do a D&C, which is that surgical. They go in and remove everything. I didn't have that. I guess I wasn't far enough along or whatnot, but they actually gave me a pill where I went into labor and passed the baby at home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like my mom was there with me, that kind of thing. But there wasn't a lot of, I didn't have any follow-up of like, hey, here's some support groups. I mean, I ran across a few, but that was just because of my profession, not because, hey, you need this or you could use this kind of thing.
I think that we have to do a better job in that area of having resources available and having someone to talk to. Just it's a part of life. And so we have, and to me, I'm surprised that there were no resources.
Yeah.
Like the hospital didn't. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but like just you saying that you had to do that at home with your mom. That even sounds like it could have been pretty traumatic or, that whole process that nobody ever really talks about.
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage people. Have you found any support groups? I know I've had clients who talk about support groups that they are a part of.
Every once in a while I'll still hear about some things, but no, nothing that I've seen, consistent or been super obvious about. But at the same time, I've also haven't looked for it in the past couple of years either.
Yeah.
So there could be more out there than what I'm just aware of right now. But,
well, we definitely need to advocate for more of that in our hospitals. So if I have any people that work in hospitals or making decisions in hospitals, let us know how we can help with that. And that may be something that, some practical steps, because I do think that's super important to have a place that feels safe for people to be able to talk. Would you say is like the most misunderstood thing about infertility, fertility issues, miscarriages, all of that?
It doesn't look the same way for everybody. That it's not, it doesn't mean like you can have times where it might be a sperm issue, it might be an egg issue, it might be a hormone issue, it might be a timing issue, it could be it could be just life stress that there's no real reason to explain why it just isn't happening. And you can have secondary infertility. You can have a baby and then have infertility after that. So it's not any one picture kind of thing, just like there's not any one solution or intervention to help out. So I haven't personally dealt with people who've kind of been dismissive or belittle or, kind of thing. Okay. Well, we'll say this, that one of the biggest misconceptions, at least for me, is that, well, I don't know if misconception is the right word for it, but I get quite often, right after I lost the baby, not everyone, but a lot of people's go-to consolation comment was, oh, well, watch, you'll get pregnant again before the 9 months, and that you wouldn't have had that baby if you had been pregnant with this one. Which in my case did not happen, but a lot of people it did. And so there was that temptation in the beginning to go, oh, okay, well, then I doubled down on like the frantic panic about, well, we got to get pregnant again because I need this baby to justify that loss,
right,
kind of thing. And that's not fair. It's not fair to that their child. It's not fair to yourself. Like, it's each one's individual. And so if that happens and that's a comfort, that's fantastic. But it doesn't mean that it's going to happen or that it has to happen or that, that loss was senseless if there's not another baby. So
I think that's really good. I think people need to know those things, like not to say certain things. So the last question, I think it's the last question. Obviously you have a beautiful child with you.
Thank you.
Tell me about emotionally what that was like being pregnant with Matthew.
Oh, it was interesting
how it
the first trimester was a lot of anxiety. Like, I had expected anxiety, but it was so hard because there's a time, between when the test says you're pregnant before you feel anything. So it's like, there were days, especially the first couple of months, where I was literally having to tell myself, okay, I believe I'm still pregnant. I believe everything is okay. Everything has to be okay.
There's a lot of
Lord, let his heart be beating. And a lot of having to pray. For me, it was prayer. So I was praying out my worries rather than like focusing inward on them, going, okay, God, please let him be okay. Let his heart be beating. Because then there can be things of like, twinges, and you can have random spotting for things that are completely benign and completely okay. But every one of them was just such an anxiety trigger for me at the time. Because there's so much that you don't know that is completely out of your control. The losses to begin with are out of your control. They're usually from chromosomal anomalies or just some genetic thing, or it just happens, and so you don't have any control in that. And now here's the situation. I really want to keep this baby. I want this one to be the one, but I have, again, no control, and I don't even know if everything's okay or not. I can't see. I can't tell. I don't know. So there's a lot of that going on.
Was there a place where you were able to say, okay, this feels safe for me to, like, I don't want to say let my guard down, but like it felt safer for you to celebrate maybe?
When, I guess probably sometime in the second trimester when I could feel him a little bit more consistently. That, and then since we had gone to a couple of different ultrasounds and saw the heartbeat a couple of different times, and at one point I recorded it, just the sound of it, so that I could just play it whenever I needed that reassurance. Like, nope, this is what it sounded like. We're good. This is okay. This is what's going on right now. So when when I had that sensory feedback from him, that really helped because it was outside of my head where I didn't have to just grit my teeth and almost call it, I call it white knuckling your face, where you just have to hold on to what you believe, whether you want to or not, because if you let go, it's going to be hard. So you just white knuckle it and hold on tight. And so once I had something extra reassurances, that really helped calm down the anxiety a lot.
Now, from the faith perspective, you said God told you, no, like you're going to have a child. How did that word anchor you during, during Matthew's pregnancy?
Well, it did and it didn't, because he gave me that word in, I think it was November one year. And then the following February, I had gotten pregnant, and it was an ectopic pregnancy. Yeah. So, and again, I had stopped taking tests, and I just had that nudge of like, you need to take a test. So I was like, okay, whatever. I did. And it was positive. It was positive. We were excited. Yeah. Well, then the next morning I started bleeding, which in hindsight, I know that letting like the nudge to take it was a safeguard, because I wouldn't have known ectopic pregnancies. You can bleed out internally, like all that kind of stuff could happen if I didn't know. Because again, periods were just inconsistent. So I would have thought it was just a regular cycle and not even thought about it until something bad had happened, which thank God didn't happen. But the moment I saw that positive test for that one, I remembered the promise, but immediately the verse of he who promised is faithful was just playing in my head in loop for that day, the next day, all the way through having to walk that whole process of the ectopic, which in and of itself was its own, we could have a whole other conversation just on that one. But so there was some anxiety still because he had told me, just because he told me I was going to have a baby, did that mean that this pregnancy was going to be the pregnancy kind of thing? But when it got farther along, I was like, I'm going to choose to hope and just rest in that hope of, you carry me through 2 losses, you carry me through pain that I never would have imagined. Hopefully, God forbid that this is another loss, but if it is, I know you've got me, and just try to hold on to those the truths that I believed and could buy into, no matter what the feeling was saying.
What I'm hearing is that you still have to say, I'm going to hold on to my faith regardless.
Yeah.
And that it sounds like it was just a decision to make. And now I said that was the last question. One more. How is your husband through this process? Like, obviously it was a different situation, different person, but like, I know he was aware. Matthew, thank you so much for holding on. I'm going to let you go in just 3 minutes, I promise.
You got it, dude. You got it.
Yeah. How did you get support from him throughout all of this?
Well, the relationship, one of the things, because this is the second marriage for both of us, and so one of the things that we got in the pattern into a habit of before we even got pregnant was going, hey, for us the key word is, hey, my baggage is showing up. And we would talk about it, whatever, whether, from previous interactions and stuff. And, hey, I think I'm really sensitive to this. I think my baggage is showing up in this way. And I think that this is what's going on. And then we already had a pattern of trying to talk about things and be open about things. And I think that was super helpful going forward through this. Because, he knew I was anxious. He knew I was kind of nervous about things. And so being able to say, okay, I'm really kind of freaking out. He'd go, it's fine. You're okay. And he'd give me that reassurance in whatever way I needed that day. But we talked about it. He was supportive. We were we were just together, more of a team going forward with it.
So Matthew, I'm going to let you off easy. He's like, thank you. So everybody, can we just give a shout out to Jessica and Matthew for coming? Matthew missed his nap time and things changed and he had to be on the broadcast with us. We are actually grateful that he's here.
Me too. Thanks for letting me bring him.
No, absolutely. I would be not a very compassionate person at all if I was talking about you having this beautiful child. So we're getting thank yous. Thank you for bringing him. Thank you for sharing your story. Again, I know it's not it wasn't an easy journey. And so I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate you working your schedule and all of you. Thank you, Matthew and Jessica.
Thank you for letting us come.
Yes, I want to encourage everybody. Make sure you join us right back here next week. Every Thursday at 12 p.m. There are a couple times we may cancel or postpone, but for the most part, we're going to be right here. New guests, different topics. Just join us every week. You never know what we're going to be talking about. I try to promote it through the week, but just make sure you're joining us. Also, I am hosting a boundaries workshop. And this was just something I was asking people, like, what classes they would sign up for, what they want. And they were saying, we need to know about boundaries. And so that's what we're going to be offering. It's going to be next month. So if you are a person who says, I notice that I'm always people pleasing or always struggling to say no. And if I do say no, I'm struggling with guilt of all of that. Go ahead. You want to make sure that you are registering for that workshop. Again, let me find it. I'll put the information in the chat. But again, that's going to be next month. Let me see the date. I can tell you guys. July 15th at 10 a.m. So that's a Saturday morning. We're going to be talking about participants are going to learn how to challenge people-pleasing behavior, how to be assertive about their needs, to say no without guilt, prioritize your needs and your self-care. So if you know if that's you or somebody that you know could benefit, let me know. We would love to have you join. It's only going to be $57. We're just going to do that masterclass. Why? Because we need to be able to set those boundaries. It's important. And so many people, as a mental health professional, I see, that's a conversation that comes up so often. Like, well, I wanted to, but I couldn't. I didn't want to displease these people. And so again, thank you guys. Make sure you are setting your alarms to catch us next week. Thank you again, Jessica. Share this broadcast so people can see it. I know a lot of people are working right now, so people will catch the replay. Jessica, is it okay if I share this on your page?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I will definitely go back in and share this on your page. And so prayerfully, your journey will help inspire, encourage, and just help people to find ways to take care of themselves through the journey. Thank you guys so much. I love you all, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.